Okay. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's episode. I'm on my porch at, you know, and it's past midnight, and I wanted to speak about this topic in a different space. All right. So the title of tonight's episode, hopefully you can hear me well, is Explorations into Evolutionary Design. And so pretty much we can say that from the contributions of Darwin and the contributions of science, in some sense, there came a sort of acknowledgement of a subtle and gradual change of form, and we began studying the creature that we were with a more sophisticated momentum. Now, I find that there's two types of explorations accessible to people, especially when concerning the intelligence of this creature. First, we have the mysteries of the world to confront, and then we have the mysteries of the individual. So pretty much, Mr.Within is asking the dear listeners to begin considering life occurring in individual states of being and in collective states of being. Now, the collective states of being is kind of wondrous because it is the value of various individuals in one moment, in some sense. Pretty much, it makes us ask whether our intelligence is purely from our individual containment of ourselves, or is it from how the whole world is contained. Considering we're biological creatures, just a second, guys. I usually put headphones on when I speak, so I change the song sometimes. Oh, okay. A pattern of self developed. This pattern of self began replicating itself in others. Physically it could not, but subjectively it could. Every person you see is actually your mind in display. And what that means is that my words, even though they enter your ears and the sounds originated from a different intelligence than you, in some sense you hear it in your own way based on how the meanings and the symbols have value. So in some sense we can say there's a level of design prior to the level of meaning, and because our meaning is kept in designs, it's kept in linguistic design. So eventually a person wondering about the design of their evolution, which is an incredible question. It is a question not many are privileged because they are burdened by the tasks of the world. It is a question that comes to one when they've had enough of suffering or enough of joy. What that means is suddenly the subconscious savageness of the child's mind who's wondering whether the world should be a utopia and dystopia throws away the whole projection. In some sense, we don't want a nightmare or we don't want a happy dream. We want reality. And the need for reality will suddenly be these sort of roars, as if people who are normally in their program routine life, suddenly they will begin noticing the way they have kept themselves can be different. We can say that if you have an understanding of the world, that understanding of the world is either static or dynamic. If it's static, it is a belief. You have beliefs about the world. If it is dynamic, it is beyond that. An example of a static view on the of the understanding or knowing of the world would be like, for example, me in this moment. I'm like, what would I say? Okay, guys, the Earth is round. This is what I see as the only thing that's here. You know, this is a static. It is not authorized to change. It's an image your mind holds that some part of you, either consciously or subconsciously, or maybe even it's the movement of the unconscious, has not authorized that. You see the inner structure of the being, how the self. Okay, think of it this way. Externally, like in front of your eyes, you have to look at what's around you and then function. Okay? But when we go looking at what's behind our eyes, we find a sort of it's like ocean waves, a shape coming out of nothing, going back, like a shape coming from nothing, going back to nothing. Our thoughts come and go, and that gives us the illusion, very poetically, that our thoughts die. Okay, what that means is like what's not in your attention is not real to you. Do you see? So if one thought comes, somebody says something for a moment, you hear that, suddenly that image arises in your mind, but suddenly their words end. You see, it's like constant access, no access, access, no access. It's kind of like the heartbeat or how our intelligence blinks. We're oscillating between meaning, no meaning, meaning, no meaning, meaning, no meaning. I find this to be the case. Which means that consciousness is a rhythmic phenomena. That means if you just sat still and did nothing, you would be conscious, but eventually, for a long time, if you did nothing, you would suddenly see it's as if the intentions behind your biological mechanism that kept it moving will in some sense become dormant. So pretty much meditation was an effort of an animal to stop being an animal. And that was the divine intervention. The divine intervention was a leap into a subjective consciousness. This subjective consciousness is not being taken seriously by our academic institutions, and regardless whoever, even the greatest professor of psychology comes to me and says, no, we are making strides towards, I will say you're not. Let me tell you why. Because the educational system has had no purpose, and therefore the economy has come and given it purpose. What that means is people did not know where to go, and so somebody came and told them where to go. And that's the story of our educational system, that it lost itself. The value of knowledge lost itself in here, because in ancient times the unknown was kept. That means they knew little, so their imaginations would try to fill out the gap, the missing gaps. So this is why the more ancient the more we go back in history, the more the world was a mythological place. And what is considered myths, like we look at it and we say, oh man, look at those ancient Greek myths, was on some level in that moment of history, the image was accepted real. What that means is the ancient men of Greece and Athens walked the streets wondering how the gods looked at them from beyond the clouds. They wondered how the gods looked at them. That means they were not doubting whether the god was there or not. And so you see, it's very important, because I find I have faith, but not the religious kind. I find I have an instantaneous, direct experiential faith. That means as my eyes are open, so is my world. Do you see? It's like nobody can doubt their heart is beating or not. You see, nobody can doubt their heartbeat. You cannot doubt the life force that is contained as you. So we are in a very unique position in the cosmos, such a unique position in the cosmos that it is unheard of because there seems to be no one else in the cosmos. It seems that Earth is isolated, and even if we were to send messages to other galaxies, the light that would hit them of us would in some sense be 200 million years in the past. So what that means is we are in an isolated solo position, which makes it very easy to think that the cause of existence was an accident. You see? So for me, it's about individuals and how that their individuality is oscillating between the known and the unknown. So what that means is if you were to know, like you must first, the question is like a subjective attempt. The answer is an objective solution. You see, it's an objective action, right? So there have been many moments where I've sat down and my mind's moved faster than my body. And so I've kind of wondered about couple steps. I kind of opened up to this. Like I consider myself at least a relatively decent chess player, you know. And I remember when I was growing up, my uncles and my aunt, they all played chess, like in their childhood, like just like, how can I tell you? I shared an old pastime. What that means is, I don't know how to explain it, but pretty much there was chess. There were some great chess players around me. My uncle, my aunt, and some other people, and and so and of course I forgot kind of the best one. My father would play a lot of chess. Pretty much, I would take the chess word and I would lose. I would lose all the time, but in losing, I would kind of improve. You know. And it's this very unique situation where I remember when I was younger, I would lose in chess to my father would win. Eventually it came a time where I won. I started winning. And when I started winning, whenever we played, I would in some sense uh, make mistakes rather than trying to make it easier for my father. I made it harder for myself. Okay. And so anyways, what I'm trying to say is that chess was around me, and in chess, it's a very unique game because it has to do with vision and predictive strategy. Okay, so it has to do with the recognition, and it's kind of like a war where you have to capture the center of the field first, and pretty much whoever captures more of the board wins. You know, it's pretty much like old school conquering strategy. You know? And anyways, pretty much you think a couple moves ahead, so you wonder about the implementation of various ways of your own future in the moment. Okay? So it kind of comes down to something like that. Now, if we wanted to take it to a mystical level, the mystical mind eventually will reach a point where, as the person becomes just any time, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're whatever, what action, what meditation you do, just if you're steered towards, like your decisions and your free will take you towards silence and stillness, that means the world is asking you to be an observer. Okay? And there, either the spirit of rebellion will be revoked in you or the spirit of contentment. How would I go further? You kind of notice the multidimensional aspects of one dimension. You see, just like you can have a multidimensional view on your body, you could consider your heart, your various organs as their own unique kind of dimension of function. There is also the overall function. The overall function of the whole body surpasses the individual purposes of various parts of the body. But various parts of the body need to be functioning at their greatest ability in order for the whole thing to be kept. And I can say one of Mr. Within's kind of visions for civilization is that people come into the recognition that it's not that everybody should go do one good thing so they were all rich and there's no problems. It should be that we should begin taking responsibility in society, similar to it's like if society was this giant brain, different tasks in society would be different parts of this brain lighting up. And so when we can have an ability for a social system to recognize it is one organ, but it has various functions, and each part of the organ requires to function at its best, we will have to liberate individuals who are deciding how the overall picture looks. One effort is taking people to knowledge. The other effort is so there's two kinds of I find two kinds of crowds that usually occur for spirituality and mysticism. Okay, one crowd is seeking objective truth beyond this dimension. The other crowd is seeking. How can I tell you? One is going to one. How can I say? The eyes of some people are going to emptiness. The eyes of some people are going to fullness. Some people want to go into heaven and paradise, and some people want to, in some sense, go into a state where they are lost again in the unconscious systems of nature. Okay, you are a conscious part of nature right now. This lifetime is not just, don't think you're just the story the world is feeding you. You are a story not told yet. You are an untold story. And when you understand this, I find children will care for their civilization if they care for history. For me, history is not just an old dusty book. History is the honor of civilization. It's pretty much you realizing there have been so many different minds engaging with society and trying to contribute to it. Okay, some minds have gone savage. Think of the dictators and the Hitlers. Some minds have gone savage. They're like, fuck this, I will control it. My free will dominate the world. You know, like that kind of mentality, right? They have not understood. They have not understood the world. They have perhaps understood their free will, but not the world. You know? Because if you look at the supervillain and the hero in any story, the supervillain and hero both have abilities that normal people don't. Do you see? That means the villain is more intelligent than the average person, but the superhero is more intelligent than the villain that he is able to beat him. But you see, there is two sorts of enemies. You can physically. This is the problem with violence. You throw yourself into a domino effect of enemies. Okay, what that means is when you're violent to a being's body, their mind will be vicious to you. Vicious. That means I've seen people's mind, and there's been times even in this life that they have attacked me like a snake jumping. That means they saw a flaw and they attacked it. And in certain moments, I've had to let go of certain situations, and I've had to combat the situation. When I was younger, I would really engage into situations because I still saw myself as an egoic being. I still thought I was a thought, so whatever thought I had, I would act by it. It was very robotic. Eventually, I came into a kind of understanding that you have to advance not your objective existence only, but your subjective existence as well. And the subjective existence comes from your the lessons you learn from moments in life that you go towards emptiness. And the other side, which is in regards to the enlightening wisdom, are lessons where you're learning from how intelligence is filled. So I've had moments where I've looked at the world where I was shocked. I saw it completely as empty. I thought there was nothing, no God, no intelligence, no spirituality, no nothing else. It was just meaningless shapes. You know, I've kind of dabbled into that chaotic state of mind. But what was funny is I recognized something that has shared, that was the same kind of background force, like kind of substratum force of every philosophy I have ever had. It has been that at the end of that philosophy, that idea, that vision, it ends. It doesn't end, but that vision ends, and the new comes. So for me, death is true. It is true. It is the end of the physical, but it is also a new experience. Do you see? It is a moment where I mean, it's not that we should be afraid of death. Whatever we're afraid of, we avoid and we don't study it. That's the issue, you know. This is why so many people, right? And there's a lot of bullying occurring. I kind of like I was raised in an era where like we fought in school, right? Like when I remember like I attended Tehran International School for some years, for like 4 years, and when I was in that school, it was in Iran, and Iran is a monotheistic kind of society. And so it was just this, it was hilarious. It was the school of all the kids who were angry at their parents for bringing them to Iran when their kids had been in other countries, right? So anyway, so anyways, there was a lot of angry kids there. Okay, even I was angry, you know, but my anger would not come forth, and especially because of the name I was given. The name you give a child is fascinating because it will define a part of the character of that child, you know. And so I had a religious name, so I had a sort of kind of strong religious morality then, right? I was young. I was maybe like this was grade 4 or something in Iran, in this school. And the school was, of course, an IB system kind of. They had teachers who would speak in English, pretty much, and it was a state where you would fight. Okay, whenever there would be some sort of issue with bullying, you handled it there. You didn't wait. You know, it's like you can't just be pushed with. There's a cause and effect law, right? If a person is just pushing and nobody pushes that person back, that person's mind doesn't understand they can stop. Okay, so sometimes you have to, in some sense, uh, how can I tell you? The one lion surrounded by a pack of wolves gave out a roar, you know, that even the future children of those wolves kind of felt the fear from that roar. And so what I'm trying to tell you is like in you got to confront it. Sometimes when chaos comes to you, it doesn't mean you should change your character. It doesn't mean if bad stuff happens to you, you got to be a bad guy. But you got to be mindful because whatever your mind is exposed to, think of it this way: the mind is kind of like this whirlwind of conscious energy that is constantly making itself into a subject. You know, some people, it's very funny in the New Age community, they believe in channeling. Okay, and I remember like there were a couple months where I was just watching Bashar videos and all this, and I was very engaged with like the supernatural aspect of an extraterrestrial contact and whatever, because I felt like, okay, there's no way that whatever intelligence has created human beings, there's no way there is nothing else, you know? It's like the world is too big to push out the odds that quickly. And this is why so many intellectual people are like, whenever they get cornered, and whether they're religious or not, they're like, "Oh, hold on, man, hold on, I'm agnostic." And agnostic is pretty much like the rich man's way of smiling at the how would I say it? It's the rich man's way of smiling at not being involved. You know, it's like that person who's there, but is not there because he's not engaged. Okay, like it's so important. So many people I find that who become incredibly wealthy, and they become like millionaires, billionaires, become influencers, they have huge companies. I find it very fascinating that most of the people in business, they're trying to get the consumer's attention. Okay, like this is I had a sales job for some time, and I did experience like this is in 2011, before, it's a while back, before I was into this whole Mr. Within thing. But it was this kind of sense of, how would I say it, like it's very easy to manipulate emotions because by introducing thoughts into the situation. And sales has to do with you seeing what the guy sees and then somehow finding this product you have and seeing how it can fit into that person's life realistically. Okay? And so how you communicate the world has a huge implication on how that world can be engaged. On some level, I feel like this is my mentality. I feel that eventually we will understand a self-maintaining system has the highest value in society. So many things that maintain themselves give freedom to the creator to go create something else. You see, as if man made God, as if God made man, and then man was like, yo, God, where you going? And God's like, I gotta go create something else later, you know? So there is, the world is filled with stories, and Bertrand Russell, this atheist, would tell you that it's only good to have rational beliefs. But I feel it's not only good to have rational beliefs; it's very good to for you to navigate your intelligence and recognize that the ability to observe is the ability to take the world in a new way of sight. Think of it as if we create this measurement system of measurement called sight. Just like, you know, how there's like candelas in science, like for luminosity in some sense. Pretty much the space of one candle's light. But imagine we said that sight could be measured and could be contained. That means we can say like, how would I say it? The thought of sight is a unit. It has a design. So right now you're this evolutionary being alive and functioning, and the way kind of where we're left is like at this very strange philosopher's table where we're like, okay, something unknown has suddenly become known. This known thing has made itself into a sort of sophisticated character in a story where it's like it would be like kind of a beyond the Aquila rift situation where you suddenly see the material existence needs no symbol. It's like you looking at the stuff around you and being like, whoa, these things don't have to have that thought I have on them connected to them. It's like you find the freedom and the separation between chaos and order. They exist at the same time, yet they are not the same. If we if we were an young Native American kid or Native Indian, I don't know which one's more useful to use as a term, but imagine we were a Native American boy who went to his grandfather, who was the chief of like the tribe and the organization, and we saw like this kid. Okay, here's the story. This kid goes and asks his grandfather to tell him a story, and the grandfather's in front of all the other chiefs, okay, of different tribes and different classifications. And so the kid says, tell me a story, grandpa, you know. And the grandpa looks at the kid and looks at all the all the different chiefs who are all gathered around. And the chief has to share some wisdom with his story at the same time. It's like sometimes the speaker's intention of what to say changes with the audience. The grandfather looks at his grandson and kneels to be on his height level of his grandson. And he says, my dear grandson, as if showing that he cares for his grandson more than all the tribe members and whatever. And he says to his son, grandson, that there are two wolves inside of you. This is a story you must know. There's two wolves inside of you. One is dark, made of darkness. The other is made of the light. And so these are the various aspects. These two wolves are like endlessly fighting. And the grandson gets amazed and says, "Grandpa, there's two wolves inside of me fighting." And the chief's like, "No, no, grandson." The chief says, pretty much the grandson actually gets it, and it's they are metaphors for different ways our character can journey through existence. Okay, there's either a good story or a bad story, or the storyteller's gone out for lunch. The grandson looks at the grandfather and says, "Grandpa, which one wins if they're fighting?" And the grandfather looks at the grandson and it says, "The one you feed. If you make decisions that are made of violence, think of it very common sense, like your attention is on violence, you're seeing violent designs, so your mind will continually have this cause and effect of violence. Okay, and the best thing to do with objective violence is first internalize it. What that means, the intention, the violence, before it externalizes, is something is going on in the violent person's mind. Pretty much they have to contemplate the values, recontemplate the values of reality. There was this, let me see if I can give you. I don't know, but I feel it was this perhaps Eastern European, I believe. I don't know, but definitely European enlightened teacher by the name of Gurdjieff. And there's a story where somebody came, Gurdjieff, his father, before he died, he looked at Gurdjieff when he was really young, like maybe like 3 years old or whatever. And a 3 year old kind of later on to be an enlightened kind of teacher of the society. He in some sense, his father tells him, "My dear son, I'm dying right now and I have nothing to leave you with. I have nothing, so I'm sorry for that." The father apologizes to the son for having nothing. And then he says, "But son, I will give you this. Just remember this." Hopefully I get this right. He says, "Before you get angry at someone, tell them you need a day. Like whenever you get angry at someone, don't respond to them right away. Take a day. Have one whole day before you respond to somebody who says something like in an angry situation. So before becoming angry, just contemplate it for a day and then go do whatever." Right? Something like that. And Gurdjieff's father passes away, and Gurdjieff later on realizes how valuable that advice was, because sometimes we're such instinctually animalistic and reactive creatures that we don't process the data. We don't let the data brew. We don't let our observations of reality to brew, or our beliefs of the abstract to brew for a bit, and for us to actually see what is happening. Because the way we define ourselves will be how the world is defined. There would be no other way. If you define yourself as a weak person right now, if you, this is what Jordan Peterson said, don't speak about, what do you call it? Jordan Peterson said, don't speak about yourself as if you're weak. There's some people who feel it's okay to go tell the world how they are weak and suffering. You see, the problem with the beggar is not that the person is asking for money. The problem is the attitude, the weakness of mindset, how the mind is not set to a more able level. You see, your mind is something that you can set it to a certain design, but you have to be very careful. And this is why I say it's much more better for you to find your own way in life rather than constantly trying to find other people's ways that are successful. And of course there will be exceptions, because like we have all the scribe personality. The scribe is by far is should be as even higher than a king be valued, the position of a scribe. But nobody cares about the scribe, they care about the philosopher. They don't care about all those people who allowed the content to transition or move on, right? Sometimes it's not just important to have an idea, the continuity of the idea is important. And one idea that we all share in common is that we want humanity to continue. And some people are like, why? Humanity is being destructive. And we're like, why not? You know, why not just continue? And so as we continue, there's some great phenomena. Thank God we as human beings get bored. The boredom is our savior. Boredom is our savior, I am telling you. There is no greater force in this life than boredom. Because boredom will make you, regardless of what you believe, be like, okay, let me go do something else, you know? It's a getting off of one chair of seeing the world and going and finding another way to stand or sit in this reality. And so there are people on this world who choose to stand, and there are people on this world who choose to sit. Those people who choose to sit, they have chosen into the journeys of the mind. They have chosen to function more as a mind than as a body. So this is something that I want to say to many people, that your mind, you again, you oscillate between being a body that thinks it's howling a mind through a brain around. You feel like you're this moving projector, biological projector of reality, but then you suddenly see you can also be the mind that is projecting a body. And that's a very unique sophistication, because in movement you can't. When you move, it's like I mean, of course, there has been moments where people have been enlightened by movement. Okay, that means like either you're moving into a new state of consciousness by observing more of stillness in this world, or you're seeing more of a dynamic movement. For me, it was very interesting. At first, it's like you don't know anything. Then you seek to know something. Then you get rejected from being able to know. Then you reject yourself from even wanting to know. You know, and then eventually you suddenly realize you will get bored, or there would be so much unnecessary. It's as if like your reality, when you're not happy, is like it's like a, how could I say it? It's like either your mind is not doing the work or your body isn't. This should be the new vision of health, and this should happen. This is kind of like think of it this way, as this force field kind of wave going through every academic department, going through every branch of knowledge. That means in any field, it doesn't matter what it is, in any university or school system, they can apply this. And what it is that to recognize that anytime you can notice a singular dimension, and as you see that singular dimension, see a multidimensional perspective to it, it's like any person with multidimensional data must immediately communicate it to the singular dimension. For me, it's like, it's very fascinating, because right now society doesn't care about art. When society sees art, they're like, okay, man, get a real job. You know? So it's so anyways, to continue, is that in every field of knowledge, in every branch, you can do this. Whoever you are, whatever you've been interested, I find falls into some design that can somehow find its way like a stream towards a river, towards the ocean of knowledge, right? We got to start building our civilization, okay? And first it begins with the person taking themselves just to a kind of pace of requirement. So you don't try to like, not everybody should try to be like billionaires, you know? That'd be such a waste of intelligence, you know, if everybody wanted to do the same thing. That's like as if one person is only alive. I'm trying to say that concentrate on one design of reality. Just look at one part of your moment and just concentrate on it. As you do, data is kind of, think as if your eyes are constantly taking in data, okay? This kind of taking in data, eventually you will see, like, think of it this way. Right now I have a pen in my hand, it's in front of a table. I look at this pen. First idea, okay, gray pen with black corners, right, and a silver part, right? So my first thought comes like that. Then I look at it and I'm like, okay, so this is a black pen, and then my mind thinks about what I can write with this pen. And eventually it becomes one of these things that, as the more I look at something, the more there is single pointed attention. This is pretty much the essence of any meditation. It's a single pointed concentration. This single pointed concentration, eventually your mind keeps going through various images. Think of it this way: meditation is very interesting because it is like this engine that the moment you wake up and you think and do actions and do whatever, there's this incredible movement. Okay, so that means your cis intelligence, your physical biological intelligence, is in motion. It's moving. The engines are kind of moving. As you suddenly become still, as is the intention of meditation, suddenly stop what you're doing and just be still and watch your moment. Okay, you will suddenly see it's this thing where the engines of the mind are slowly kind of becoming more calmer, and the texture of the type of thought in your attention changes. So it's not about thinking you should not have thoughts. You should watch thoughts and watch how they come and go. There's a man named Sri Ramana Maharshi. He's one of those actual, like, kind of many people consider really legit enlightened people. Like, he's enlightened certified. And he has this sentence, this quote, where he says, "Let what comes come. Let what goes go. See what remains." And any person who can understand or comprehend the meme, the skeleton of this idea, the design, the outline of this idea, you will suddenly see that's the truth. That's the profound revelation in Buddhism and many things, that it is impermanent, imperfect, and incomplete how the world is. Okay? These are called the three jewels in Buddhism. And so that means any person who has comprehended these three dimensions, these three ways that existence appears, will suddenly find comfort. Your mind stops suddenly creating stress because something is, like, think of it this way. You're taking your attention out of being a certain relationship of relationship of thoughts. Okay, let's say right now every person is a bundle of thoughts. Ooh, how to continue. Most people have this fear. I remember, this is, here, I'll say it. My uncle, who was a very intellectual atheist, an incredibly intellectual atheist, and we were having a discussion about meditation, and he heard from my mother that I was meditating. And so he came to have a conversation with me, and I could understand from his mind he was saving me from, my imagination. And he came to me and he said, listen, there was this scientific experiment evidently done, that this guy went into a pool of water that was at room temperature. And so eventually he stayed in that pool of water, and suddenly the guy went, in some sense, he lost his mind. And he was telling me that how, like, he was kind of like, how would I say it? He was kind of showing me that I shouldn't try, because there was a hiding chaos to await, that awaited me. Right? It was, and I'm like, man, he's just inspiring me to do it more. But anyways, I heard that and I was shocked. I was shocked because I realized my uncle had never even wondered what meditation is. Right? He had seen a sort of disparity, and that could happen, guys. You see, this your relationship with your body and your thoughts. It's like your moment is your temple, and you choose if you want to take your shoes off, which means you stop living a dishonest life, because there's no point. Like, what's the point of being a different image to everybody else? What's the point of lying to your world when you're here once? Just the fact that there's mortality makes it okay for the person to. Uh, Sometimes the fear of the future can evoke cruelty in people. The guy's afraid of what's going to happen, so he has to be violent or savage or whatever. So think of it this way. I'm gonna kind of take this into a science fiction realm, which makes it easier to talk about and let's say less disruptive. Um, okay, actually, let me start from here. After you've studied one dimension, imagine you're in one room. Scientists at some point looked at this world and conceived it as a room that had edges and could be measured. Okay, so the laws of the universe were contained in a three-dimensional space. So after you study the three-dimensional, after you have lived, let's say, a life where you're moving around, you climb trees, you go camping, you kind of approach nature with a reverence, not with a disgust of man. Nature doesn't care, like, doesn't have hygiene. It's like somebody looking at the soil and being like, the soil's too dirty. Once you've studied the first room, you will wonder about further rooms. All these esoteric sort of spiritual cultures and communities that are out there, whether they stretch from Eastern mysticism to, I don't know, Western conspiracy or whatever, right? Regardless of how far they stretch, after you've observed the body, you have come to a contentment with your physical body. You have accepted it without needing to have any thought over it. It's like your physical presence. Once you're content with your physical presence, then you require to find contentment with the physical presence of the world around you. That means you're not the only intelligent being here, which goes to say that everybody knows something you don't. That means you can learn from every moment of your existence, not just when you're in the classroom. You can begin studying your life, not just what the teacher assigns you. The greatest thing that the teacher can do is to inspire the students to care about knowledge and just go forth with their own interests at mind. Because the cost of dictatorship is creativity. I'm telling you, when one idea goes into one idea wants to rule them all, you can say that is sometimes religions are perceived as such content that they are trying to. It's like a massacre of cultural, various different cultural values. That means as people wonder more about truth, they will try to shape all truth. They are trying to contain all truth in their worldview. Okay, so it's very important, because I noticed this. I noticed something many speakers around the world don't notice. That where are you? Who are you speaking to? What is the setting like? What is the world like? You know, these talks kind of motivated me to kind of polish the mirror of my conception. That means I was like, okay, let's ask the deep questions here. It is only the fear of the mind that doesn't want to step further. And sometimes you shouldn't blindly just seek the supernatural. You shouldn't just accept supernatural data simply. Sometimes you have to be in a state of mind where you're like, okay, I'm a creature on the ground that's on the ground. So we have to fix the problems on the ground, then we wonder about galactic situations. You know, like, some people in the Mount Shasta area feel like the mountain is an alien. Which is not that kind of a far-fetched idea, because Shri Ramana Maharshi, who his quote I shared with you earlier, he has another quote where he says meditation is your true nature. But he also, for him, they asked him, who's your guru? And he said this mountain called Arunachala in India. So for him, he got enlightened by where the world was. It's very fascinating. Our minds evolve. And as they evolve, so does the way we keep ourself as a sense of self. You know, and I think this is the thing. When you're younger, you're still dependent on the externality to bring you, to move you more than you move yourself. I feel as the person just matures in this existence, they begin realizing the value of having to move themselves, you know, and not to get too caught in ideology. Language is very useful. It's a technology. It is how our inner realities communicate with one another, right? When someone writes something in the when someone writes, their hand is kind of being the instantaneous expression of abstract data into objective symbols. So how we in some sense express the deeper dimensions of the mind is by communication itself, because fundamentally intelligence was an active thing. It was an active self-organizing phenomena. Okay, the fact that we are naturally self-organizing means that, okay, regardless of what happens, the balance of nature has a louder voice. Yeah, something like that. Crystal S. Bush says, "I love you." Thank you, thank you. You know, I find that love is a very interesting concept because it changes. Its value changes as your value changes. An exploration is a step into the unknown. These Mr. Within talks, I'm trying to I just want to share how far we can actually see ourselves. And when we look at our evolutionary design, it has to honor the story of the world to function. It has to, in some sense, maintain its subjective structuring of the world. You have to learn to not just be aware of the horse, your horse. Imagine back in the day, you were like a horse rider or something, and so you had to be aware of the horse, but you had to also be able to, as the horse runs, you also being able to balance. A lot of designs on this planet are usually interconnected. What that means is like either our hands evolved to the size of the apple, or in some sense the tree was gracious, you know. And what that means is that's the beautiful thing about design with unknown dimensions. The design has roots into the unknown. And I remember I have this idea I've developed. I call it the great work. I'm not using that with an alchemical context. I came up with the concept before I even knew about like the alchemical use of the term, the phrase, the statement, the great work. But the whole thing is that your great work is the most efficient and your own way, like pretty much how you organize your mind on paper. and how you organize your conceptual and all your existence. If you can draw it out on a piece of paper, you have in some sense found a way of looking at your mind, a snapshot of a way your mind was. Think of it this way: when you go read your diary, you're like, whoa, this is how my mind was working on that day. I personally don't write diary, but the great work has been my consideration of all the subjective contribution, just all the thoughts I want to leave civilization before the final curtain is pulled. On some level, when you think of people as the intelligence of a universal sector, when you start thinking people are advanced communicators, they're again advanced communications of their universal sector. You suddenly see there is no longer time for any sort of disciple, guru, teacher dynamic. Like there's no time for that. It's as if every person find your clearest vision and just run to help this world that's here. You know. Sometimes the best way to help people is to help them in a way where, like, it's like, well, what's that saying? It says, teach a man how to fish and he'll never go hungry, and don't teach a man how to fish and he'll die. Like, I don't know, like some sort of saying like that, right? So you have to just as you explore in your evolutionary design, you return to who you were before language shaped you. That state is, I have to use the word state because it's not just, your attention is not just objective in that moment. You see, this is how again I classify the dimensions of existence. That I say there's an objective aspect, like the stuff that I see, and then there is the subjective aspect. Okay, and this subjective aspect is very fascinating because it is the watcher of the world. It is the witness. In the Upanishads, they kind of came with this unique kind of architecture of a statement where they said it's the one that hears the hearing. You know, it's like it's unknowable. Their conclusion of who you are as an individual when you wonder about it internally is that it is unknown, as if you reach a state where it transcends the language threshold. And when it transcends the language threshold, what happens is that it is no longer a conceptual form. That means you begin receiving data that cannot be put into language, which means it cannot be storified. So it's your raw, direct experience kind of. Your mind opens before it could be closed, or your mind was open before it was closed. You come to that point. Pretty much you find your true nature and abide by it, and you recognize that the voice of the world is in your ears. I feel like I should share a story. It's a nice story to share. Okay, here, I'll say this. There was this kid back in the day. He heard about this guy who was enlightened. This is like an ancient story I saw online. You can say it's, I believe that the story was like an ancient Vedic story. Or it could have been Zen, actually, I don't know. Well, you can choose the context. But I think it's a Zen story. But anyways, so this kid hears that there's this enlightened person, some person who has just gained the ultimate knowing of the world. Okay, and so he goes there and he sees it's this chill dude, like chill, like kind of old guy, just sitting on his porch, and he's just sitting, he's doing nothing, you know. And so this kid goes there for days, and this guy is just in this sort of strange meditation and whatnot. And what happens is he's like, "What is this?" Like he constantly asks the guy, says questions to the guy. Like at some point he stops caring for his meditation and says, "Hey man, what is this? I've been here too long." Like he's imagining the guy. Like the story goes, he stays there for a couple of weeks, like a long time. Okay, and this guy, he doesn't say anything, and the kid keeps trying, says, "Hey man, I have this question I gotta ask." And the guy is just quiet and silent. And eventually the kid just sits there. He gets bored and he just sits there. Some time passes, you know. Eventually the kid gets so angry. He's like, "What the He's like, "What is this?" He's like, "I've been beside this enlightened guy, asking him this kind of enlightened truth, like asking him to tell me what it's all about." And he in some sense is saying nothing. Like, how rude is this guy, right? So he goes to the guy and he shouts and he's like, you're a show, man." And he says like he says something, you know, in his anger, and he strides away. You know, he says like, "I've been here so long, you don't respond. Like, what's wrong with you?" You know, and he leaves. So he's suddenly has this outburst of rudeness or whatever, right? And the kid goes and he's walking and he's like, "Shit, like I feel I should go back." And he suddenly goes back. He gets this feeling, to his intuition takes him back. As he goes and he suddenly comes there, before the kid can speak, the guy for the first time speaks to him. And the kid is like really there wanting to hear it. The guy looks at the kid and says, "Why this ceaseless coming and going?" And it's said that that kid attains kind of nirvana, enlightenment in that instant. Why? Because the guy in the silence saw this kid and saw him get angry and all this stuff, right? And he was still in his own state. Nothing disturbed him, right? But this kid came and he kind of got angry and he got like he went through a cycle of emotions. And this dude just looked at him. Why this ceaseless coming and going? Why this constant, in some sense, um, jumping to different extremes of behavior? You know? Trust me, the power of a question was that it created the free will. A sort of wonder of phenomena now has evolved into a thought. And as a thought now acknowledges this is not just a thought, it is the observer of the moment. It is the witness within. And when I say within, within all phenomena, not just within you think just your brain. Because what is your brain or what is your mind is your moment. Your moment is being your mind right now. You don't understand how advanced creatures we are. You know, I remember having a dream, and in that dream, I could, like an actual dream, I could move. I was conscious. I could go left. I could go right. You know, I moved in the dream. And then I woke up and I just sat on the side of my bed shocked. I got shocked. I was like, how was it that my body was asleep, but my mind still was like this virtual reality that I could still move in and do things? So I realized kind of like a sort of virtual reality level to my dreams. Okay? And it was a very unique experience because I woke up and I'm like, "Oh my God, how can I tell the physical world is the physical world or it's the mind? It is the same simulation just placed on this kind of, like, it doesn't matter if I'm asleep or not, the mind is functioning in an advanced way, in an advanced state in either way." Right? In the Ribu Gita, they spoke about, in some sense, there being kind of these three states to life: your waking life, and then there was deep sleep, and there was your dream state. Okay? And in some sense, they considered this fourth enlightened state that it was a state that was the same within all of them. It was like a state that it didn't matter if you're awake, it didn't matter if you're asleep, it didn't matter if you're dreaming. It was this ultimate kind of center of the wheel of karma moment. The center of the wheel doesn't move, the wheel does. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this talk served you.